Welcome to Every Step Podcast. I'm Christina Weston.
And I'm Judith Beck.
Every Step is the podcast where career and life meet.
With a new guest every episode, we explore the gutsy issues affecting everyone in the workplace. Well, welcome everyone to the last episode of Every Step Podcast. It's our bonus episode because we wanted to talk about everything that we've been hearing about through the year and also things that we think might happen next year. So the things that are trending. And it's great to see so many of our past guests that we have here today. Fantastic. I just want to call out a couple people. I want to say, Mello, if I see that you've gotten one more award for your book, Beating Burnout and Finding Balance, well done and congratulations. There's not enough room on your banner anymore to put all the awards. So well done. And also, Marina, congratulations on your new book, And So He Did. And that's out now, and that's a fantastic book. And also, Because She Can is also one of Marina's books. So we've got some great books out there that I would recommend people have a look at. But let's get this thing kicked off now so we can talk about it. And there's a few things that Christina and I found that that are really topical. And one obvious is working remote and working from home and what are companies doing. And I went on the internet and I found all kinds of different things about working from home and what people are saying. And you can pretty much get as much for as against, but there's a lot of surveys out there. And one I want to highlight, it's the KPMG CEO Outlook survey. And that found that 64% of leaders globally predict a return to in-office working by 2026. And further stats show that in the US, 90% of companies are intending to implement their return to office plans by the end of 2024. Now, I went in and I thought, okay, which companies are doing this? And I was shocked by the ones that are already implementing it. Back to work, JP Morgan, back to work 5 days. Amazon, Salesforce, Apple, BlackRock, Citicorp, Disney, the happiest place in the world, get back to work for 4 days. Goldman Sachs was 5 days. Google, IBM, 3 days, NAB, 5. I mean, these are big companies, and there's a lot of tech companies in there, which you'd think would be the ones that would be more supportive of working from home and be able to do it. But there's obviously a lot of companies have gone, hey, you know what? This is not really working. And they're stating the reasons being things like creativity and productivity, difficult to manage teams, and also career progression for the younger ones. So what do you think? What's the views out there, and what are you guys finding? Who wants to have a go?
Vanessa, you have a crack at this.
Yes, I can talk for a while on this one, so I'll try to keep it fairly succinct. We look at this from a performance perspective, and I think there's two angles to this. There's the productivity or the perceived productivity from the individual versus the productivity from the business. And so while there's so many people claiming that, oh, I'm way more productive at home, company profits are not suggesting that. So we need to make sure that whatever is, there's no point everyone going, oh yeah, this feels great if the company is actually not being able to sustain the profits. And the thing that we are hearing on a very regular basis from very senior people, CEOs and managing partners, especially at accounting firms, because you can measure this, is that they're now paying 20% more for the same productivity as they were getting. Well, that's not productive. So I think you're right. It depends on the nature of the team. It depends on the nature of the work that they're doing. But there's a lot to be said for seeing a lot of bottlenecks, because it takes a lot more, obviously in our speak, we call it cognitive energy. It takes a lot more cognitive energy, rather than just finding out by osmosis by the person sitting next to you where things are up to and things like that. So, don't get me wrong, I'm all about working remotely. None of our team has actually worked ever in the same office. So I'm very, very understanding of that. But I think, when you've got people that are doing collaborative work and creative work and things like that, I think there's a lot of bottlenecks that are starting to happen. And when you've got bottlenecks in workflow, you've got psychosocial hazards, you've got people then getting frustrated, you've got negativity creeping in. So I can see where they're going with that. I think the deal is you either need to severely upskill leadership at all levels to be able to cope with remote, and that's a whole different kettle of fish. So leadership outcomes, research is showing, is really the same as what they were pre-pandemic, but obviously in a hybrid or remote environment, you need to go about them completely differently in a lot of cases. And so I think if a lot of companies haven't invested in really upskilling their leadership, it's just easier to go back to do things the way that they were doing. It takes less cognitive energy. So I think in these cases, they've taken the easier approach of just going back to the way they do things earlier, rather than necessarily upskilling leaders to make sure that what is productive for the individual is also productive for the business. So I can see where they're going with that.
Any other
Anybody else?
perspectives?
Yeah, just a question around, you mentioned there around profitability. How are they actually identifying the lack of profitability when someone's working remote? That was quite interesting.
Yeah, so when you look at the profitability of the business, that's actually quite easy to measure from their overall productivity and utilization on their client rates. They're the ones, accounting firms and legal firms, this is very easy to measure, because that's exactly how they're measuring profitability, is how much is it costing them to service that client? Is it in line with what their forecasts are for that particular client? Is the utilization really where it needs to be? And in a lot of these cases, the utilization is not where it needs to be. And therefore, you can see why they're looking at doing things differently.
So on the one hand, we've got productivity allegedly going down, and on the other hand, we've got a scenario where people are saying we're burnt out. So Mello, what are you seeing? What are you hearing in terms of the other side of that coin?
Burnout, yes. Thanks for jumping in. That was really interesting, actually, Vanessa. Really interesting to hear that, actually. So that was good to hear some of those perspectives. On the side of burnout, what I'm noticing personally, like I'm going into a lot more workplaces physically, and going into places and doing seminars and workshops in the room, so to speak. And yeah, just noticing a lot more fatigue and burnout and exhaustion, and people are vocalizing it even more than they used to. Some of them would try to hide it and mask it, but now people are openly talking about it. It's been a tough couple of years, of course, and our resources have been low. And post-pandemic, there's still a bit of residual, almost like a hangover from the pandemic, and our cups haven't been quite filled up there. So yeah, I'm seeing a lot more of it in individuals and in workplaces.
What do you think they could do to improve that? Is there something that you would go, okay, I think they need to be doing this?
Yeah, sometimes it's actually the most fundamental, 101 self-care, to be honest. Most of the time, it depends on where they are on the spectrum of burnout. So some of them are earlier on, where it's chronic stress and it's that busy time of the year right now, getting to the finish line type thing. So there's that sort of thing to manage that. There's people that are more on the other end of the burnout, what I call the sort of orange and red zones. And it's a matter of then really maintaining your self-care, eating well, sleeping well, exercising, meditating, all of these things. Because when I do ask the question in the room, what are the first things that you let go of when you get stressed or busy? And it's exactly those things. I won't go to the gym tonight. I won't exercise tonight because I'm just too busy. I've got too much to do before the end of the year. But these are the actual things that we need, to maintain our energy and our physical and mental energy.
One of the things that
101 self-care, really get back to basics mentally and physically.
One of the things that I've heard people say that the reason why they feel more burnt out is because they aren't separating work and home. And because they are working from home, they're actually, in their view, working longer, but they're not, it's like work is sitting right there on your dining room table, and it's there constantly, and they don't necessarily have that home office where they can break away from, but it's just a constant. And even on the weekend, they're seeing it, where there was a little bit more of a breakaway when they were working in an office, leaving, going home. Are you hearing things like that?
Yeah, definitely. All those points are all valid. So one thing at home that I do hear is people don't take enough renewal breaks. So they don't stop and get up and chat with somebody, go for a walk around the block, or go chat with one of their colleagues. So they just keep trying to push through. And sometimes we just keep pushing through even when we are tired and we are fatigued, and the quality of our work is not going to improve. So the first thing is giving yourself permission to stop. Even if you're working from home, go outside and pat the dog for 5 minutes, or go for a walk around the block, just to break that cognitive load. So that's one thing. And the other thing is creating clear boundaries. Like, am I working or am I home? Sometimes our workplace can be literally the next room, and going from one room to the next, our mind can still be at work. I always encourage people to create a separator, even if it is, finish your work at the end of the day and go for a walk around the block. And then when you come back, you are home, so to speak. Because that transition, often on the commute, it might be from work to home, driving home or catching the train home, is that sort of wind down time. So creating those natural transitions at home. I personally work downstairs. I'm downstairs in an office right now. My family's upstairs. So I don't just walk straight up the stairs. I actually walk out the back door and walk around the block, pick up my dog, take him for a walk around the block, come back, and then it's like, now I'm home, and physically get changed out of my work clothes, like my business shirt, and get changed into my home clothes. So it's a very physical reminder, okay, I'm home now. My children can see I'm home now. So creating those mental and physical boundaries as best we can.
Absolutely. Anyone else on that subject? Well, Christine and I have had this conversation a lot about the ones that are in their 20s and 30s that aren't getting the same kind of work, making the work connections and learning from their teams. If they're working from home, they're not getting the same kind of experience. And how is that going to affect them later on? And, you kind of go, that's where when I was in my 20s and 30s, that's where I made those connections. That's where I learned a lot. So does anybody want to comment on what's happening with those generations? How are they going to overcome missing out on, not knowing what they don't know, kind of thing? Luke, you're in your 30s.
Yeah, I'm laughing there, Judith, because I was like, is this directed at me? Everyone else is silent. Yeah, well, I guess it's interesting for me. I mean, I've been out 3 years now consulting and working very remotely. And yeah, I spent 15 years in the agency world amongst a lot of people and that high vibed energy types environments. But yeah, I guess probably I don't know what's going on right now with that generation, because I've been out of that world. But yeah, for me, I will raise a point around sort of the intent of one's role. And I've always looked at it myself as well, about the tasks at hand and what you're doing from a JD and a job description point of view, and just your emotions around the intent and the purpose and the why of day by day, minute by minute, hour by hour, what you're actually doing and what your brain's doing whilst you're doing that activity, whether or not you've got a negative connotation around it or a positive one, and whether or not you're sitting there going, I'm literally doing this task because I'm getting paid really well. Therefore, when I get paid well, the outcome of that is X, Y, Z, and I can pay the mortgage, get the boat, whatever, have that freedom. But yeah, for a lot of people, I guess that they're not deeply thinking about the intent and the emotion of the status of the brain chemistry, right, I guess, as they're performing each task, and they haven't set a very clear intent and a clear purpose and a clear why, and therefore you're kind of like a hamster on a hamster wheel if that isn't clear and there's no vision around that. But as I get into sort of my mid-30s, I've I guess become a little bit more mindful about that from a minute by minute perspective of how I'm feeling task by task, what that means on a deeper level, and then you tend to have a clearer outcome. Well, that works for me. I hope that kind of makes sense.
Karen, what's your perspective? You've raised your hand.
I'm looking at this from an educational perspective. So when people explore running training with me, and originally moving it online was great because they could record it and it felt really good for everyone that, if people didn't turn up or someone was sick on a certain day, they had a recording. Now I'm seeing a bit of a shift towards we'd like to run it in the office. However, it's really tricky to coordinate everyone in the office on the same day, because if they have set days that they've got people to agree to come to the office, they're normally having meetings. And so people have sort of been trained that if I'm going to do professional development, I'm going to do it online. I think the pandemic did that. And so I can see there being real benefits, especially if you're a kinesthetic learner, which means you learn by doing, to have, if you are going to move back to a model where you've got people in the office more often, to also start to consider when are our training days, when are our meeting days. And then I think the issue comes down to how much control do you want to have or can you have about how people congregate? Because I think we've got really used to doing things. If you've moved from in the office to a complete online environment, or you've done your whole induction online. I've heard of a number of people who've done their whole induction online. They've never met any of their co-workers. I think there's a real challenge as people transition back to think about, well, what are the days that we're socializing? What are the days that we're learning? What are our meeting days? And I've seen a shift recently that it used to be we want to run all our training online, and now no, actually we see the idea of everyone coming together, not just being what they're going to learn, but the fact that they're going to have that time together.
Yeah, I think there's a real danger in some ways with just online, because it can become a ticker box exercise. Yes, I've ticked that box. I've got that badge. I've managed that compliance aspect of what I need to do. And I know all of us have played those games in the past. And there's that challenge in terms of that bit around osmosis, and it's even down to really fundamental things around the right etiquette, right corporate behavior in terms of your etiquette around how you engage with people, how you behave in meetings, there's just a whole bunch of those things that we all took for granted because we had it role modeled, or we were slapped on the wrist, or, chastised politely. But where does that happen now? Those kind of, they're the harder, softer, I'll kind of call them the softer things, but they're a lot of those are the important things that build trust and build your personal brand and those sorts of things. And that's the piece that's, you can't just do online. That's the challenging piece.
Well, part of the attracting people to your organization is based on the culture. But it's not only attracting, it's losing people as well to other organizations. So when I was doing the executive search, that was very, very powerful and important, because it was very difficult for me to be able to headhunt somebody out of a company if they were bonded to the organization. So one of the things that they've said in these surveys about the fact that the reason why they want people back to the office is for corporate culture reasons, because the people are less bonded to the organization. And that has a direct effect on retention. And so when I used to headhunt people, if they weren't bonded to the organization, I could get them in for a conversation and I could get them to the other company. But if they were bonded and they were saying things like, no, we have a really good corporate culture and I really like the people that I work with, and it's very collaborative, and, we even socialize together. They're not doing that. If you haven't spoken to your team any more than on Zoom, So if you haven't had that face-to-face collaboration with any of your team throughout the year and it's all been via Zoom, how bonded can you possibly be? So those are issues of retention that companies need to think about. And I mean, we had Darren Murphy on one of our early episodes, who's a remote specialist, said you've got to be intentional. So if you are going to go down that track of making sure you have a hybrid or everybody's working from home, you've got to be intentional about how you bring people together, because if they're not bonded to your organization, then where's the loyalty? Anybody have a comment on that? Vanessa, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree. Culture is such an important part of it, and culture should be documented no matter what your situation is, pre-pandemic, post-pandemic, shouldn't really matter. Whatever makes it great, that needs to be a lot more written than unwritten. It takes one person that didn't get the unwritten memo to really upset the apple cart sometimes. So yeah, I think that's super important to make sure that the culture is there, and I think it is really important, like we say, that's always been an outcome of leadership that we should be getting, but you have to work really hard to do that in a hybrid environment compared to what you would do in any other environment. So, again, it all comes down to cognitive energy for us. If people are overspending cognitive energy or having to overspend it because they've got to learn how to do things differently, that's a big part of what's leading to the fatigue. As far as we look at it, the whole idea of leadership is to make sure that your team is optimizing their cognitive energy. And if it's just hard to bond with someone because you're on a Zoom screen, like, it's just hard. So, there needs to be some workarounds for that. But yeah, we're definitely seeing that engagement is lifted the more that people can spend time in the office together. Interestingly, the Gallup, the latest Gallup surveys showed that the highest incidences of stress is actually happening when people are in a hybrid environment. So the lowest levels are actually when people are working fully in the office. So that's kind of counterintuitive compared to most people are saying, oh, but I'm really stressed if I have to come into the office. Really? So yeah, I think there's some things there. And when you think about it, if we have to be that intentional about what we're doing, when and how, that takes a lot more cognitive energy. Planning just got a whole lot harder. So, I think when all days are the same, you don't have to give cognitive energy to, oh, but that's a Tuesday, and therefore can I do that kind of work on a Tuesday, or can I set that meeting at a different time? Like, you're just adding a whole layer of cognitive complexity with that. So I think that's something for people to think about as well.
Absolutely. Then that is a very good entry into our third topic, which is resilience and sensitivities. And Christina and our favorite word, triggers. Trigger is our word this year that we just don't want to hear anymore. So the question is, it's because of everything that's going on, and I mean, there's a trigger warning on everything. I mean, and they actually found that trigger warnings actually cause more anxiety to the people that see it at the beginning than it would be if they didn't have the trigger warning. But to the point of the fact that we aren't collaborating, we don't know our colleagues as well, then are we getting triggered by things, or are there more sensitivities? Are we more sensitive to what someone says, or because they said it over Zoom, so it didn't come across the same way, or they took it wrong? Sensitivities and resilience. Are people more sensitive these days and less resilient? What does everybody think? Or what are you experiencing?
Absolutely.
Do you want me to put a trigger warning on here?
I agree. Yeah, we're overly sensitive. Yeah.
Yeah.
And what's caused that? Variety of reasons. I'd certainly think post-pandemic has, it's such a catastrophic, stressful time for everyone. And I feel as though the politically correctness in our sensitivity has definitely been heightened. I probably, look, I'm not a clinical psychologist, so I probably won't go any deeper than that. I'm sure Vanessa's probably got more to say around why we are sensitive. But yeah, well, I'm seeing it anyway from an anecdotal personal approach. I'm certainly seeing a lot of sensitivity around not only my business network but social network as well.
Marina, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I was just listening to what Luke said. I have two people that work from home, my son and his partner. One 3 days a week, and works 2 in the office, and he works full time at home. And I come from grew up in a different era, different environment, and everybody's so sensitive. We are the most disconnected human beings in the history of human time. We are so disconnected, and we are continually being disconnected by keeping us away from work. There is no purpose. Give me a game, let's text each other, let's not call each other. And I mean, to get up and to have a shower and to go to work. I see these kids, they work in pretty high profile jobs. And, I'm watching them and I'm thinking, are you working today? They're dedicated to their jobs, but it's not like being at work and being dedicated to you've got the staff, you've got your work colleagues, you see the good and the bad in people, you learn about people. What are you learning from home? And who was it that said before? The gentleman that said he has to walk around the back and come back in. Like, that's great. How many people are going to be that disciplined to do that? I don't see it. I just think it's political correctness has destroyed us as a human race. Social media has destroyed us as a human race. We are disconnected. Why are we even talking about not connecting people back into the workforce? I just think it's wrong. And I feel strongly about it because I see it every day. I see what they've turned into, these kids. Do you see your work colleague? Do you just talk to them on a Zoom? Do you see people on the train? Do you see what's happening in the world? And then you work from home, you eat at home, you live at home, and then you watch movies at home. And when does it stop? When do we go back into the world of the living? Yes, COVID happened. And we all had to go through COVID. But we've become so entitled, so sensitive, so precious. Everyone is so precious. Children are becoming so precious. We are becoming so precious. Where is it going to end up?
And we all want it our way, don't we? We all want outcomes to be our way.
Correct. And for me, it's just sitting back and watching it all. I'm thinking, what's happening? There's an eeriness. There's an eeriness in the world at the moment. And unless we go back to some normality, what I call normality, and stop making excuses for everybody. Like, we have to tip your toe around the people that we employ.
Well, I would advise, at the end of the day, I would advise people who, especially the younger ones, like I've always said, in the 20s, get out of the house because nothing's happening at home.
That's right.
And opportunities and things that you haven't experienced yet aren't going to happen at your house.
That's right.
So, and the exciting things and the fun things and all the things that I can think about just in those eras, they surely didn't happen at home. They happen, you go into work and it's usually surprise stuff, that, you just might talk to somebody on the way to work, or you meet somebody on the way to work, or you're in the city and your, activity, just the activity of it all. And the buzz, I just think obviously there's a place for flexibility for work, and there needs to be flexibility, and there needs to be probably a hybrid thing, but the intent, get out and see people and do things. And what is it that Dr. Simone said when she came on, Christina?
Get up, dress up, show up.
And show up. Yeah. And it's so true. You gotta be out there. You gotta be in it to win it, basically. And otherwise, I think people will look back and go, where did those years go? And what happened? Nothing happened. I did my work from home, but nothing else happened.
Karen, you had something to say?
I'm reminded of an episode that you had, the Dear Digital, We Need to Talk, with Dr. Christie. And there's 2 other books that I think speak to what Marina was exploring then. And it's this idea, it's called Stolen Focus, a book by Johan Hari that really explores what is going on. And it's a really interesting book to read, to explore, well, this idea of, Marina, eeriness is probably the best word I've heard used to describe this sort of uncomfortable feeling of lack of human connection going on at the moment. And there's another one by Cal Newport called Digital Minimalism that explores what it means to embrace tech in your life in a way that's meaningful. And Mello, I wish that everyone did what you did and sort of maybe adopting that idea of, walking out the door, taking the dog for the walk, and that's the signal of the end of my day, and walking back in the door and changing the clothing. As someone who works from home, you feel that sense of disconnectedness. So I love the idea of people going back into the office and requiring us all to go in and help them. But certainly I think there is there's probably, and someone here will have a more clinical, a stronger clinical perspective on this. I've seen a number of research reports coming through connecting, I think it was from the Royal Children's Hospital post-pandemic, an increase in mental health issues and some sort of connection between social media consumption.
That makes sense. Well, you can look on your phone at the end of the day and see how much you've been on social media. And sometimes that can be a real eye-opener. And you go, no, that wasn't me. Somebody must have found my phone. It's like, because I get shocked sometimes. And I go, oh my God. And it might be, you think, just put the phone down. And again, be intentional about what you, like, why do you want to be on your phone doing social media and stuff on the weekends?
Lost in someone else's world.
Not your own.
In someone else's world. In someone's, what is going on? Yeah.
And then we spend our times being either envious or wishing we had that life rather than living our best life and getting out there and being in nature and meeting people and creating connections.
Yes.
And that's when we get up. That's when the upset happens, when our life doesn't meet the life that we perceive we should be having.
That we see for 3 hours a day sometimes. Some people stay on there for up to 3 hours a day, looking into other people's lives or more, lost. And where's life? Life's just going past, and what we're engaging in fantasy.
And times that by 12, times that by 300. How many years are you losing from that point of view? And, I can tell you right now, when you look at LinkedIn, or I'll use LinkedIn as an example. When I see people's profiles, and because I know a lot of them through executive search years ago, they haven't done half the stuff they've said they've done. I mean, there is over-exaggeration going on everywhere. And, so don't be jealous of other people and really just kind of go, just divide that by 2 and maybe we're somewhere close to it. Because seriously, there is a lot, and the same thing with Instagram and Facebook and everything else. So you don't want to be worried about what other people do. Just be worried about what you're doing and how you're living.
Yeah, other people's opinions are none of my business.
Yeah,
exactly. And
what people say about you says more about them than it does about you.
Yes.
That's very good.
Yeah, Shana, I should clarify, other people's opinions of yourself are none of your business. Of course, we care about other people's opinions in a collaborative, intelligent conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and remember, the old saying is about resilience: sticks and stones will break my bones.
Now you're talking, Judith.
You really have written books before.
Yeah.
I've had that one thrown back in my face, though. I've said that sticks and stones one to my teenage son, and he's turned around and said to me, "Yes, but you've also said, Mum, that words are powerful."
The people that mind don't matter, and the people that matter don't mind.
That's exactly.
But how do we solve some of this? Because we've actually kind of labelled all the issues, and we're going into a new year, a new few years, and we've identified a whole bunch of problems. And if I listen to Vanessa, it's like it's going to mean we all have to work harder to be
Normal.
to adapt, to let go of. I mean, it's going to be hard work to let go of some of our addictions around social media and those sorts of things. It's going to be harder to be a leader, to be more intentional. You know, what do the next few years look like against this backdrop of challenges that we've just all been speaking about for the last, however long? Because it's not straightforward. We're going to continue to see tension because we're adapting, we're changing, we're having to learn, we're having to be different, we're having to try new things that are uncomfortable.
Yeah, great question. I've got one small solution, Christina, and it could be along the lines of buying one of the Alcatel phones from back in the 90s that literally have 0 apps on them. And I only say that because here in New Zealand, we've got the second highest youth suicide rates in the OECD, and that statistic came out literally 18 months after the implementation of social media and when Facebook and Instagram and everything was born. So, look, correlation versus causation, but if we can do those simple things, I mean, I had a guest on the chat show the other day. She literally has like a Nokia phone that only has calling and texting, and obviously that the purpose of that is reducing screen time, right? Because the screen time is increased by the many apps that we've got on our phone. That is one small step in the right direction. Getting back on a phone for texting and calling purposes, as opposed to having 800 apps on your phone, might be
and
one.
remove all those apps that have all the gamification in there that get you sucked in.
Yeah,
and they get you sucked in.
Well, they're addictive in nature. They're designed in a way to grab your attention, and so you have to corral the tech in order to ensure that it serves you. And Luke, that's one of the suggestions in digital minimalism, and I think it is this idea that you're a lot more intentional about how you do engage with your daily rituals. And maybe it needs to be regulated. Maybe some of this needs to be regulated from a organizational perspective. When you look at productivity, that's one of the things that really stood out to me in the consumption of social media. And I love to put LinkedIn in a slightly different category. I think that's maybe self-serving. However, I do think that having some intention about why you're using some of these tools, and even email, I would extend it beyond social media, and with that transition back to the workplace, really having a look at how your team is spending their time in busy work all day versus meaningful connection and creating solutions and solving customers' problems. I think there's has this technology really made us more productive? And I think it's a leadership question, Vanessa. I think it comes down to, what does a leader of the new age look like?
Yeah, absolutely. Needless to say, we have lots of work on the go in this space at the moment. It really does come down to leadership. Leadership 2005 is not really a thing. We need to make sure that leadership is evolving to definitely include a lot more science. So when I did my dissertation for my master's, a lot of the research was pointing to the fact that if we give people more science around how their brains are working, how their team's brains are working, recognizing that no two brains are the same. I look forward to a day when we don't need the word neurodivergent. Every brain is different, and every leader should be able to understand how to lead in those situations. So really focusing on the outcomes according to research that have shown is effective leadership. Now, how different leaders get there is completely different. It's kind of like you do you. How do we help you to tap into being the most authentic version of you? But there is a roadmap that we can give people now for the outcomes that they should be getting as leaders. And if we give them that and kind of make leadership a lot easier, then that helps. But we do need to make sure that people understand the science. We need a lot more neuroscience in leadership. And we need to make sure that people are able to get outcomes. We have to focus on outcomes-based leadership. I don't care where or how people work, but we have to get outcomes and we have to get performance. And so how do we make sure that leaders have that? I think when you've got people that sit in the office 5 days a week, your leadership skills can be a little sloppier, and that's a bit more forgiving. But when they don't, that's a less forgiving environment. So we need to make sure that leaders are really equipped for that. We need to make sure that people take responsibility for this, even around the culture side of things, and normalizing feedback. Leadership 2005 is let's coach people on how to have difficult conversations. Whereas leadership now is like, there are no difficult conversations. We've normalized it. We're going to disagree, and disagreement is awesome. That's how we get creativity. That's how we get new ways of doing things. And just because someone disagrees with you is not bullying. So, but we need to formalize that up front, and we need to normalize it before it becomes a thing. It's just a way of, let's get discussion going and doing that. So being really on the front foot, because I mean, let's face it, a difficult conversation takes cognitive energy. No one wants that. If you've got a team of people that have to have a lot of difficult conversations, like, your team is draining their cognitive energy and on a really fast track to burnout. So if we can help them to make sure that people don't have to have difficult conversations anymore because they're set up for that. So there's a whole lot of this science that we can now take to make leadership a lot easier. But we do need to make sure that we people have the skills to do that. And I think coaching the emerging leaders as well. There's probably not been as much investment in emerging leaders previously as what we think there have been. Luckily, we're seeing it change now. But often when we're coaching senior leaders, a lot of their issues could have gone away if they had have coached the emerging leaders better in the first place. So yeah, so I think that's really what we need to do. We need to have better leadership, better science, and people, we really deserve to have access to that because it makes people's life easier.
I think you hit the nail on the head about, we've got to train these emerging leaders, the young ones up, because they are the managers in the future. And if they haven't got the resilience, or if they're too sensitive to feedback, well, then that's going to change things in the future. So it's important to train them now. And that's not going to be easy, because actually a lot of managers are actually afraid to give constructive feedback. Because
to Vanessa's point, it takes emotional energy to brace yourself as a manager if you're not skilled, or if you're expecting the backlash, to actually have those conversations.
Yeah, and it's when we don't have those conversations, or it hasn't been, I mean, ideally, you have great leadership frameworks set up as a starting point. So people know exactly what they can say. When you think about it, imposter syndrome, or when you think about, most leaders, when they're first put into leadership roles, they were just really good at their job, and all of a sudden they're managing people. And so most leaders spend all of their cognitive energy second guessing themselves. Can I say that? That person did this. What should my response be? Da 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 da. Instead of just going, here's your roadmap, here's your culture, go. And the reason that so if the frameworks aren't set up in the first place, and then those conversations that need to be had aren't had, that's where we're getting all the issues around productivity and profitability. It's all of these people second guessing themselves, and workflow bottlenecks, and all of these kind of things that are creating, massive drains on productivity and profitability. And, that's a bit that we need to really focus on.
Lots of big issues. We're kind of starting to get towards the end of our conversation, and this might be a great opportunity to just go around the room in terms of people that are left in the conversation, and just share some thoughts about what we can do coming into the next year to create better leadership outcomes. Karen, do you want to kick it off?
To celebrate leadership outcomes. I got the first part of the question.
Just what your thoughts are for what we could do to improve leadership outcomes and improve things coming into sort of the next year or two. And really kind of come at it from your perspective and your
so I really like what Vanessa talked about in terms of great leadership framework. And I think leadership comes down to, in the context of the things I care about, digital habits and how people are engaging with their work meaningfully when they're at work and what the expectations are of them. So I think this idea of mapping the culture, mapping the way we do things around here, being really explicit, and that will in many ways make a return to work for people a lot easier, especially those who haven't been there for a while or maybe haven't spent a bit of time there or don't necessarily know the rules of engagement. And I really like this idea of it being at that, you said emerging leader, Vanessa, so I'd be interested in sort of what the definition of that is, but I feel like everyone has to manage stakeholders. And so it's in some ways, Christina, a move back to being a little bit more, I don't know if it's prescriptive, but in the process of being clear with people about how they show up at work and how they engage with their digital tools, it's helping people be more effective in their roles. So I'd like to see more of that.
Marina, your thoughts for next year? And
I think we need to be clarity. That's a great word in leadership. Be clear to what you need and what we're working towards. You know, we're working towards, if you're working for me or we're working towards growing something, do you believe in it? Let's all believe in what we're doing and come together. Understand one another. Yeah, we're going to have good days, we're going to have bad days, but we can't pussyfoot around each other. We just need to, let's get the job done and enjoy life and go back to connecting our staff, connecting our organizations, looking at one another. If there's a bad day, there's a bad day. And as a leader, I'm going to say, today's your bad day. It's okay. Tomorrow will be a better day. Let's work on why it was a bad day today, and we'll fix this, and we can't do that unless our leaders are connected to us. And I think face-to-face and a little bit more in office, interconnected rather than disconnected.
thanks, Marina. Luke, your thoughts?
Yeah, thanks, Christina. Just to address Karen's emerging leader fact, I would imagine it would be anyone coming newly onto the scene as a leader. To when you ask the question around what do you mean by an emerging leader, and then on my path there around the experience I've had with leaders in my past, the ones that have always had absolute success would be the ones that have really spent a lot of time, workshops and energy on building a like trust and understanding of all of their members outside of work and outside of the actual task and remits at hand. They've been vulnerable as well, and I guess they've given more of their humane side rather than just their role within the organization, and obviously, look, everyone within that unit and cohort is moving towards one vision, one mission, one goal. But the ones that have really showed, I think, a lot of success have like genuinely, authentically have cared about their team, and they've shown that just outside of the workplace, I think, in a big way. Business is business, but we're all humans, eh? We all have emotions, we all have feelings, and I think, those are the leaders that I look at and go, wow, that's someone that genuinely cares. So that's what I'll say. I'll leave it there.
Lovely, thank you. Vanessa, final words?
Yeah, I think to pick up on some of the great points that Karen and Marina and Luke said as well, it's like, this idea of clarity. If you look at it from a science perspective, from neuroscience, the brain hates ambiguity. It goes into overdrive trying to make sense of it. Now, we need some ambiguity in certain environments to promote creativity, et cetera, but we don't need ambiguity in, can I say that? Or what did that person mean by that? That doesn't make any sense. So we spend, if you put people in an MRI machine who are trying to make sense of ambiguity, their brain is literally exploding, overspending cognitive energy. So as a leader, we always say in our workshops, you need to remove ambiguity, remove ambiguity, remove ambiguity. And when you've done that, go back and remove some more ambiguity. Because that seems to be where things are going awry. And I think, to Karen's point, and that whole emerging leaders, like, I mean, we think everyone in an organization is a leader. We should be leading ourselves, leading others, leading clients, etc., even by influence. But I think anyone who even looks like they might have a team under them at some point in time, even if it's just one or two people, I think if we can get them at that stage so that they can hit the ground running and make sure that they're feeling really supported coming into those new roles, that's massive, and will save the leaders above them and the leaders above them and the leaders above them a lot more cognitive energy, so they can spend time on the stuff that really makes sense to them, because they're not fighting fires and putting out these things that, quite frankly, good leaders lower down the ranks really should have dealt with. So I think more science, and I think better coaching of emerging leaders so they feel really supported, and we can create clarity. And I really think autonomy's gone too far. This whole idea of like, oh yeah, now be autonomous and off you go. And then people come back and it's like, oh, that was not quite what I had in mind. Okay, so we need to provide a little bit more clarity around these guardrails of, yeah, you come to me with what you're thinking, but we need to make sure that we're collaborating and checking in as we go, because we're seeing so much rework, which is draining productivity and profitability again.
Thank you, Vanessa. Judith, your final words for this year. Well, not quite. They won't be your final words for this year, but.
Well, I think everybody's nailed it as far as, their suggestions. So I would really just sort of end it by saying what I'd like to see in the new year is people being responsible for their own progression, that it's not up to one person or people to make you successful. Be responsible for it yourself, as we take that responsibility and stop being the victim. I can't do this because of this. I can't do that because of that. Taking responsibility. I also think that we need to speak up, because we get caught in social contagions that where, oh, I need to think this way because this is what's trending out here. Or this, I need to think that. If you don't think that way, if you don't believe it, don't just go along with this, with the group. Speak up and say your piece, because you can't make change if you don't speak up, and you'll let change happen if you don't speak up. And it might not be the change that you want. So I really would like to see people in the new year get the courage to speak up about what they don't believe in, what they don't want to see, what they do want to see. And, because if you don't, well, then you get what you get.
Karen?
A very simple little message for the new year.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much to everybody for your contribution. It's been a great year for Judith and I doing our first year of Every Step podcast. We're excited to try a few new things in the new year, and we've loved having everybody's engagement, everybody's perspective, everybody's wisdom, and we wish everybody a wonderful and safe holiday period, and we'll be back next year.
And a Merry Christmas.
For more information about Every Step and our guests, head to everysteppodcast.com. To be notified of new podcasts, please subscribe via your favourite listening platform. And of course, follow us on social media and direct message us to share your ideas about guests or topics.